So I wanted to make a video today about why people are struggling so much with their mental health today and why our culture is simultaneously seeming to become unmoored and float away. Well, they're actually the same problem, and they come from a place that you might not expect. The problem is convenience, and the true cost of convenience is your sanity. Now, why is that? Well, as an individual, we don't have the cognitive power that's necessary to actually understand all of the facets of human life. There are social aspects, there are um, productive and pragmatic aspects, and there are informational aspects. There's a lot of things going on, and each one of us is oriented towards a certain amount of it. Now, if we're all kind of asymmetric in our ability to understand the world, well, what is it that brings us into balance and pulls us back to center so that we don't fall prey to our blind spots? It's forced interaction, group interaction. Now, the problem with today's society is that so many of the aspects of forced interaction that we had built into society, that had become facets of society and had helped stabilize society, have gone away. People don't understand what the cost of an ATM is, or a self-checkout. People don't understand the cost of Amazon Prime, being able to have simple goods delivered to your door at very low cost. There's a huge cost for that. It might not be monetary, but you don't understand. When you go to the local drugstore and you stand in line and you talk to the cashier who you don't particularly like, you don't understand how that forces you to anchor the etiquette and mores of the culture at that time in your behavior and to express yourself appropriately. And that performative expression of the mores of today's culture, of all the acceptable behaviors and beliefs, is how culture anchors itself across time in a group. And so when you remove yourself from having to make those sacrifices to behaving in a civil way, maybe not a way that you deem civil, but the way that society has deemed is civil, then you lose the ability to recapitulate that culture in your own individual actions. And we're starting to see that as the rate of information exchange has increased and the ability for people to communicate only with people that are like them or who would like to be like them has become more prolific. We see that people have lost their grounding, their footing. They're floating away like balloons in the wind. They don't understand that they need people they don't like to keep them tethered to the ground. And the reason they don't like them is because the people that you don't like generally are the people who are paying attention to the area that you least want to pay attention to. If you're a particularly creative person, these are the particularly pragmatic people. If you're a particularly pragmatic person, these are the particularly creative people. If you're a particularly practical and productive person, these are the emotional people. And if you're a particularly emotional person, then these are the practical and productive people. You need all of them. Every one of us needs all of them. Not one of us is so well refined and whole that we don't need anybody else. There might be instantiations like that in time, Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu, but there's a reason they're ideals. So understand that in your daily life, you need things like the checkout lady. And you need things like the bank teller. And you need to go out and interact with others. The quickest way to lose your sanity is to stop interacting with others because they tell you where you're insane. If you go in and you say some insane stuff to the bank teller, believe me, they will give you a look that will remind you that you're insane and maybe you shouldn't say that. Perhaps you're a little off base on that perspective. Now, this is also the reason why 12-step programs, for instance, work, right? They take people who have alienated themselves from their social support system, their sanity network, and then they force them into a group and force them to expose all of the insane parts of themselves. And then everybody else gets to say, wow, I thought I was crazy, but that's pretty crazy. You probably shouldn't do that. And that works. Because as you isolate yourself, you stop being able to check the boundaries of your sanity and where you're an idiot, for lack of a better term. Because we all are. I'm not picking on anybody, myself included. So, as social beings, human beings, we have to have community. We have to have interactions. You need to talk to your neighbors, not because it's good for them, but because it's good for you. You don't want to talk to your neighbors, probably. Most people in society today don't, especially if you live in a city. But you need to, especially if you don't like them. Now, this doesn't mean to invite unnecessary conflict. And if there are people that, objectively make your life worse off and more unstable, perhaps you should avoid that. But in those micro interactions that force you to capitulate in minor ways, you're a fool if you don't do it. You're a fool if all your shopping is done through the internet. You're a fool if you go out of your way not to interact with people. I'm telling you, especially the people you don't like. That's what's happening. And that's where our problems are coming from in society today. So, how do you fix this unmooring of culture? Well, it's simple. Go do things in person, right? We've lost institutions, for the most part, like church. If you're a religious person, then good. Go to church. You should. But if you're not, you need to find a replacement for that. There's a reason that was baked into the culture. There's a reason that as those institutions rose, so too did the culture around it. Because you had a sanity network, right? As you increase the rate of information exchange across people, you also have to increase the tethering of those people to each other. Because we're the checks and balances for one another. And if we're not tightly tethered, then we can't tell the difference between good ideas and bad ideas, particularly our own. So, anyway, go join a volunteer group. Do something. But you got to get involved with other people, or you're going to lose yourself. It's just inevitable. There's a certain amount of isolation that can be useful for individuals. And I think Bukowski said isolation is the gift, right? Well, Bukowski was also a raging alcoholic. And so while it was perhaps in his artistic sense, probably wasn't in a practical sense for him. And it probably won't be for you either. There are times for it. There's times for reflection and contemplation, meditation. But it's not all the time. And the degree to which you're sane is probably tightly associated with the degree to which you can comport yourself appropriately in public and interact with other individuals, especially those ones that you don't like. So, anyway, I hope this is helpful. And not just a rant, but it might be. If it's just a rant, that's okay too. But, take care.